Microsoft, what are you doing? Microsoft has been making a lot of interesting decisions recently, all of which range on a scale from pointless to downright concerning from a security standpoint. You've got things like forcing Copilot onto everything and everyone. Ads, advertisements, everywhere in the operating system that you paid for. Don't even get me started on the recall feature that they almost rolled out and had to rewind on that because it takes a snapshot of everything you've done on your PC and allows you to roll that back. It's an absolute security nightmare. And to top it all off, they are wanting to make Windows an agentic operating system. That's disgusting. So maybe it's time to start looking at some alternatives. All of that in mind is what brought about the idea for today's presentation, which is Linux right for you? AKA, who should really swap to Linux or at least consider it, and who really should not swap to Linux or even consider it. I'm gonna get into a lot of topics, but the first thing that I wanna address is the elephant in the room, the name change for Microsoft, which this has been floating around and upset even the CEO of Microsoft, and that, of course, is the lovely company name of Microslop. I wanted to address this and get this out of the way. Microslop is very funny. All right, let's just address that. Let's all take it in for a second. Here we go. All right, let's get started. As I alluded to in the introduction, Microsoft has been having a lot of missteps and a lot of mistakes recently. I wanted to address a lot of those that I personally have experienced both from a general user standpoint and a professional standpoint, starting with Copilot. Copilot is Microsoft's AI agent. It's a big thing that they're trying to push right now. AI is the big buzzword. Every company on the face of the planet has to have something with an AI agent or an AI assistant or whatever, and Microsoft's just so happens to be Copilot. Did you ask for this? I didn't ask for this. I didn't want this. So that's leading to a lot of frustration, and reasonably so, because Windows is not a free operating system. You have to pay for a license. If you buy a computer from a store, the licensing fee is baked into the price of the computer. So you're paying for this thing, and they're adding in features and an AI agent that you really didn't ask for and you didn't want. And it's a bit disingenuous because with that, the next bullet point that I have here is that it seems to me like it's a bunch of billionaires really wanting to push this AI agent and really wanting to tell consumers, general users, professional users, how to use their PC. To them, it's not an operating system that we have purchased and we want to customize and set up how we want it. We want what we want on there, and we don't want the stuff that we don't want on there. It's this group of investors and billionaires and stuff saying, this is how you want to use your computer. You want this AI agent in everything. You want this in every corner and nook and cranny of your PC. Trust us. That's what you want, I promise. So then it begs the question, and I'll get into this a little bit later, why is it everywhere? They want you to adopt it no matter what. So they're gonna bake it into everything, and it's just got its greasy little fingers into every little aspect of Windows now, and it continues to get worse as time goes on. Moving on from the AI agent, we get into the controversy that was the TPM 2.0 chip requirement. When I say TPM 2.0, do you know what I'm talking about? You're probably a PC enthusiast, so yeah, you probably do know what I'm talking about. But I would wager to say that the vast majority of people have no idea what that means. So to prove this, I actually texted my dad, who's pretty tech savvy, and said, do you know if your computer has a TPM 2.0 chip? Because you're gonna need it if you want to upgrade to Windows 11. This was his response. He did not know what I was talking about. The general population may not know what that is, and so they go to upgrade their current computer from Windows 10 to Windows 11. It says, you are not compatible, you cannot upgrade, your computer is now obsolete. And essentially, what that's done is created e-waste. What it comes down to is it forces hardware upgrades, be it your motherboard or your CPU or for somebody that doesn't tinker and just goes out and buys an entirely new system, it's forcing that hardware upgrade even though your current hardware is perfectly fine. It just doesn't have this chip that is specified by Microsoft to be able to install Windows 11. I will say shortly after telling my dad that, he did discover that his PC has a TPM 2.0 chip. He found out how to do that, so that's cool, but whatever. I told him I'd put that in here. And one of the greatest things that Windows 11 has started doing is you can't have a local account. What they're trying to do is get everyone to have a Microsoft account. Instead of creating a local user account that's just your name and a password, they want you to have a Microsoft online account that is tied to the computer that you have to use to log in and access everything. The worst part of this whole thing is that people have found workarounds. You could launch a command prompt and put in some commands to get around this, but it seems like every time somebody discovers a new way to do this, Microsoft patches it out. They want you to log into this Microsoft account, and that's because it's your PC, but their control. Which leads me into the next point, which is telemetry. As time goes on and they integrate more and more of the AI agent and move towards this agentic operating system, if you peek under the hood, the whole reason that they want you to sign into Microsoft account, they want you to use the AI agent, they want you to use Microsoft Edge, all ties back to telemetry, and that is so that they can track everything that you do. They want to know how you're using your PC, what you're looking for, what you're into, what your likes are. And the reason that they're doing all of that and collecting all this data, of course, goes back to advertisements. Advertisements are freaking everywhere. Websites, even YouTube, everywhere you go, there's advertisements. Microsoft now is doing an amazing thing and putting ads on your basic desktop. Microsoft is making money hand over fist with this kind of stuff, so it's not going to stop anytime soon. And if they're able to, they will track more and more and more, and it all comes back to serving up advertisements to the user. Then of course you have the security nightmare that was Recall. What Recall aims to be is a snapshot system that takes snapshots every so often of your entire screen or multiple screens. That way you can look back or roll your operating system back to that time a few minutes into the past. A bad actor that has compromised your machine can load in and see what you've done for the entire day. And why? Why is that going to be a thing? Why would they want to do that? I don't know. I cannot wrap my head around this. As a person that's a professional in the IT world, I cannot think of a single good use case for this other than telemetry. But you know what I think the most egregious part of all of this is? Yes, there's security concerns, there's data privacy concerns, there's all of this stuff that just sucks. But the most egregious thing that I think comes from all of this is that the general user experience just sucks. Windows in the past had its quirks, it had its issues, but one thing at the end of the day, you knew how to use it and it was pretty reliable. With Windows 11, that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. That doesn't seem to be the goal. And as a whole, the user experience is just dreadful. So what next? What can I possibly do to get around this? What could I possibly do with the hardware that I have to get around Windows 11? I'm just going to have to use it and suck it up, right? Wrong. Did you forget? Linux, the penguin, the savior of all computers. Linux is an answer. I'm not going to say it's the answer, but it is an answer. Linux and the wide variety of distros to choose from can save your PC from the Microslop that Windows 11 has become. When you think of Linux, do you think of this? Do you think of a terminal window with a bunch of commands? Because if it is, you're wrong. And you should feel really bad about that for judging without knowing. I'm just saying, you should probably feel bad. Get that out of here. We don't need that anymore. Linux is different, baby. Linux in 2026 is just different. We'll get into that. But real quick, what is Linux? If you're unfamiliar with what Linux is, it is an open source, user-controlled operating system. It was created by Linus Torvalds. I know I said that wrong and I apologize. In 1991, and since its conception has been an open source, free to use operating system. I think Linux has a bit of a stigma of being complex. Again, you think of operating systems, you think of Windows, or you think of Mac OS. Linux is saved for those hardcore guys that sit, in the back of the bus. And Linux is not as complex as you think. It's got a very easy to use and easy to install user interface with most of the distributions that you can find. In fact, a lot of these distributions don't even require the use of the terminal at all. Now, you can use the terminal if you want to. If you want to get freaky, you can get freaky. But for a general user, somebody that doesn't really know their way around that, you don't have to use the terminal if you don't want to. And the best thing is the install and all of these distributions are compatible with old and new hardware. Just because you're missing some arbitrary chip that Microsoft deemed necessary doesn't mean that your hardware is completely obsolete. It can run a Linux distribution and you can get even more life out of your hardware. Of course, on the flip side of that, obviously it's going to work great with new hardware. In fact, in many cases, it's actually going to work better with new hardware than Windows. I keep saying distros. What is a distro? What am I talking about? Distribution. What am I talking about? If you think of the Linux kernel as the engine, the distro is the rest of the car. Right? You've got your interior, your body, your paint, tires, everything like that. That is what the distro is. The distro is what really provides you with the experience of using the Linux operating system day to day. There's a wide variety of distributions ranging from absolute beginner to the hardest of hardcore hackers. When you look at the distros, it becomes obvious that Linux as a whole is very customizable to fit what you need. Let me tell you, gaming? Yes, oh yeah, don't mind if I do. Have you ever heard of the Steam Deck, huh? That runs Linux, and that plays a ton of games. I get into this a little bit later, but gaming in Linux has come such a long way, primarily thanks to Steam and the Steam Deck working on Proton, but we'll get into that later. The best part about Linux is that it is no nonsense. What you install is what you get, and you can customize it however you want. There's no telemetry, there's no ads, there's no forced accounts, no bloatware, there's no AI agent. Out of the box, whatever distro you choose, you get what you expect and nothing extra. Just a very no-nonsense operating system. When you really compare the two, it's obvious that Linux does what Windows isn't. For example, you are actually in control of your computer. There's no forced updates, there's no forced changes, there's no AI agents or bloatware or ads or telemetry or anything like that. It's your computer, you can use it the way that you want to, and there's nothing extra added on top of that. Another great thing is that Linux actually respects the hardware in your computer. New and old, it doesn't matter. There is probably going to be a distro that you can use given whatever hardware that you have. And most of the time, it's considerably less resource intensive than something like Windows. So with your hardware, you're actually probably going to see a slight performance increase. And I know Linux can be scary, but I promise that all of the distros have a modern desktop environment. Things like GNOME and KDE offer a sleek and very familiar operating system for you to navigate through. You can choose the look and feel that you want. It takes a little bit of research to find exactly what you want, and it might take some configuring to get it set up exactly how you want. But at the end of the day, it's a possibility that you can do that, and I think that's great. There's a Linux desktop environment that looks exactly like Windows. This is very familiar. Or if you're a Mac user, there are some that resemble Mac OS, again, being very familiar. If you're a Hannah Montana fan, there's a Linux distro centered around Hannah Montana. I think out of all the bullets that I put on this presentation, the one that I resonate the most with is that it's stable, it's fast, and it's reliable. At the end of the day, it just works. If I want to go on my computer and browse the internet, I can do that. There's no nagging, there's no crashing, there's no random updates, there's no AI agent begging and pleading for me to use a Microsoft account. It just lets me log in, use my computer, and log out at the end of the day. And that means a lot. Before we move on, let's take a look at this. Is that not beautiful? This is the desktop environment from a distro known as Linux Mint. And you can see it's very modernized and it has an air of familiarity with it. Look along the bottom, huh? Those are icons. Yeah, you can click those, just like in Windows. In the bottom left, huh? Looks like a start menu to me. It's probably pretty easy to use, yeah. Now it's missing a lot of the bloat, a lot of the ads, and a lot of the news. But you know, Linux is working on it. They're catching up to what a start menu should be. But I wanted to show this as a perfect example of what a Linux desktop can look like, and it's not scary at all. In fact, this is quite peaceful, right? Does that look good to you? All right, good. As I said before, one of the last things that I want to talk about with Linux is gaming. Obviously, PC enthusiasts play games. It's a big use case for PCs. For a while, gaming on Linux was considered more of an experiment than something that was actually practical. But Linux gaming has come a long way, and it's legit now. Most of the games that you want to play are going to run, and they're going to run very well. And I'm talking frames per second. Of course, Linux has those. Whoops. Uh-oh. Now, I'm not going to show this. I'm not really qualified. I don't really have the equipment to showcase this. But there are a lot of channels that are starting to benchmark games on Linux and compare them to the Windows counterpart. You'd be surprised that a lot of the times the Linux counterpart of the game actually runs a little bit better. Highly encourage you to look those up if you're interested in Linux gaming at all. It's very fascinating. But the reason that we're here and the reason that we're able to do this is because we all need to thank Steam. Steam obviously came out with the Steam Deck, which runs Linux. And the Steam Deck is able to run a ton of Windows games. And the reason it's able to do that is because Steam, alongside with Codeweavers, have developed a program called Proton. Proton was built upon Codeweaver's original project, which is called Wine, which allows Windows executables to run on Linux. And what it is a compatibility layer. So think of it this way. You've got the Windows game up here, you've got Proton in the middle, and then the Linux operating system that your device is running. The Windows game runs, Proton takes all of that, translates that in real time to a compatible version that Linux can then see, right? So it goes boom, boom, boom. Proton is the layer that sits between that, and it does it in real time, and it works incredibly well. But gaming on Linux is genuinely a great and smooth experience. It does come with some caveats, right? It's not going to be perfect. The biggest caveat that comes to mind is anti-cheat. So in games like Call of Duty, or Fortnite, or Valorant, there is an anti-cheat layer that has to run on the kernel of your operating system. Linux, being open source, doesn't jive with that very well, and so games like those don't run on Linux at all. Sometimes you're going to run into compatibility issues. It's not perfect, but it is very close, and it is very competitive with gaming on Windows. If you were recommended this video, I can guarantee that there are other video recommendations for you that talk about this great migration to Linux. It's the answer to all of your problems. It can do everything that you need it to do, and everybody who's anybody should switch to Linux right away. Linux isn't for everyone, and what I want to get into here is who should switch and who really shouldn't switch to Linux. There's going to be a use case for people to switch to Linux. It's kind of what this whole video has been about, but there is also a very strong use case for certain people to stay on Windows. I think it's very easy when you get in this loop of watching these videos to get into an echo chamber of just hearing Windows bad, Linux very good, you need to switch. That really may not be the case. So what I've done is I have created a T-chart. I love my T-charts. And I want to separate the two groups into people that I think really should switch to Linux and would benefit from it. But then on the other side are the people that probably shouldn't and should probably just continue to use Windows as they do. So let's get into the first column, which is Go Whole Penguin. This group is going to include people that are just completely fed up with the Windows experience. I work with Windows professionally. That's not going anywhere anytime soon. But from a personal standpoint, I'm kind of fed up with it. And so the switch to Linux, my driving factor to switch to Linux is because I was fed up with that experience. Another good group of people for Linux are the people that enjoy customizing or tinkering things. Linux has a ton of distros to choose from, and within those distros, you can get even more granular with your settings and the way things look and the way things run and how you handle things. I mean, you're talking about things that look like Windows. You're talking about things that look like Mac OS. You're talking about tile management systems that are completely different from a regular desktop environment. There's just a ton out there. And if you're somebody that enjoys tinkering, you enjoy that level of customization, I think you are a very good use case for switching to Linux. Another group of people would be the people that buy a computer and really, truly believe that your computer should be your computer. This kind of ties in with the first one, but really, if you don't want to deal with the AI agents, you don't want to deal with Copilot, you don't want to deal with the bloatware or anything like that, obviously something like Linux that's going to be a very lean and clean setup is going to be for you. This one might be a little controversial, but if you really just kind of browse the web and use simple apps and stuff, I also think that you fall into the Linux group. It may be a little confusing because, you know, you got to set it up and it's not somebody that just opens a box and uses the computer. If you find yourself just doing that, then the experience is probably going to be a lot better on Linux than it is in Windows. Things are going to be snappier, they're going to move a lot faster. I think once you get it set up and you just browse the internet and you just use kind of simple apps, I really do think that you kind of fall into the Linux group, and that might be a hot take. If you find yourself with a computer that doesn't have a TPM 2.0 chip, or you're just using old hardware and you don't want to upgrade, which I completely understand, we're going to be another great group of people for Camp Linux. And last but not least, you just want to. If Linux sounds cool and you want to do it, just do it. Go for it. Now let's split the line down the middle and go into the other camp, which are those that should stay on Windows. The first group that I came up with here is kind of obvious, but if you truly don't care about all the stuff Windows is doing, just stay on Windows. You don't have to go through customizing or finding a distro that suits you and then installing that or anything like that. Just continue to use the computer that you have. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And if you simply do not care, just do what is easiest for you and what makes you happy. I think that's a perfect use case for staying on Windows. Another group of people are those that don't like to tinker, or those that don't really want to troubleshoot anything. You know, other than the Microsoft account stuff, really, you can go to any store, any electronics store or big box store and buy a laptop, bring it home and use it. You don't have to go through the process of installing anything. You just use the computer that you bought. And again, if you're in that boat, that's a perfect use case for staying on Windows, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. The next group of people that will need to stay on Windows are those that are heavily reliant on Microsoft apps or something like Adobe. The Microsoft Office suite is not available on Linux, and none of the Adobe Creative Cloud suite is available on Linux. If you find yourself needing to use Excel or Word or Outlook or anything like that a ton, you're gonna have to stay on Windows. If you're also like a media professional that relies heavily on Premiere Pro or Photoshop or something like that, or even just heavy use in PDFs and you have to use Adobe Acrobat, you're gonna have to stay on Windows because those are not available or compatible with Linux. If we go back to the gaming angle, there are certain people that will need to stay and will want to stay on Windows. If you find yourself playing a majority of competitive shooters or games that rely on the anti-cheat software, Windows is going to be the camp for you because those things just, as of right now, don't work properly on Linux. And last but not least, you just want to and you really don't care. Nobody should feel bad about the operating system that they choose to use. If one is easier for you to use or you prefer one over the other, that's totally fine. Just because you're staying on Windows or you use Mac OS or you're going whole hog into Linux, that doesn't alienate you from other PC enthusiasts. At the end of the day, it's your hardware that you paid money for and you can run whatever you want to on it. Before we end the video, I do want to talk to the group of people that do want to change to Linux and get into my distro recommendations. If you find yourself asking this question, which distro should I pick? I'll give you some very low-level recommendations, and I won't get too lost in the weeds. There are tons of YouTube channels that go over the installation process, the setup process, the differences, the pros and the cons of all different distros. I'm not going to do that, and I highly recommend you check them out if you're interested in one distro over the other. These are just going to be my simple recommendations to end the video on. The biggest thing to keep in mind when you pick a distro is you don't really have to worry, because no matter what you pick, you're going to be wrong. I kind of hate that side of the whole Linux distro wars. They're fine. They're all fine. But anyway, let's get into it, with the first group being the absolute beginner, or people that are kind of hesitant to switch. I think for this group of people, somebody that's never used Linux before, or you're really on the fence about switching, the smartest thing to do is use a very stable, well-known, well-documented distro, and one that is going to be kind of familiar to the desktop environment that you're used to. This is going to include distros like the first Linux distro I ever used, which was Ubuntu. You have Linux Mint, and then something called Zorin OS. These are all very easy to set up. They're all very familiar from an environment standpoint, and I think they're the best distros for people that really just are starting out. The next group of people are those that are gaming focused. There are distros focused around playing games, which is pretty nice. There are several options out there, but the three that I went with are Kashi OS, which is built on Arch Linux. You have the ever popular Bazite, which is a mostly mirrored image of Steam's OS that runs on the Steam Deck. Very gaming focused. A lot of the menus are the same, very easy to use. It's great. And then the last one's going to be Pop OS, which is a little more complex to use, but it's still great and very great for the gaming focused person. And the last group I want to bring up are those just searching for the fastest hog on the planet, the pure performance group. These people, if you find yourself in this camp, you know who you are. You want the most out of your hardware that you can possibly get. You want your operating system to be light speed, and you just want the baddest machine around, okay? That's this group. And I picked three here, and I think this is the most controversial one, but what I chose for this group would be Fedora Workstation, Arch Linux, and Endeavor OS. So take a look at this list, okay? Whatever group you're in, give these a look, okay? They may not fit your needs perfectly, and they may not work out for you, but looking into them is going to point you in the right direction of what to go with. The most important thing to remember is to have fun with your computer again. Don't get caught up in the flame war of Windows versus Mac versus Linux, or the distros fighting amongst each other on the Linux side. Just have fun with your computer and use it how you want to.